Hello, friends. Welcome back to another, it's just the second episode of Late Night BJs with me, Buko Juice. If you are here, if you're watching this, I want you to know that Late Night BJs should always come with drinks because you will dehydrate yourself with Late Night BJs. What does that even mean, right? But anyway, last time my drink was grape juice. This time I'm on brand and I actually have some Buko juice. So that's what I'm drinking for today. Let's see. Mm, there you go. I am thirsty. So, well, hello Bubblegum Sam. Nice to see you here. I think today I will talk about. I am being ambitious today, and I will talk about Filipino storytelling. Ooh, that's such a large, all-encompassing topic. But I want to see if I can talk about my perspectives on it and my thoughts on it, especially since this is an RPG channel, how it relates to role-playing games, right? Um, Fill you in. What do you want to know, Sam? Basically, okay, let's see. Um, so we're going to talk about Filipino stories. I use the term Filipino here, and there has been some discussion about the term actually. There is a growing movement of calling it Filipinx, which I don't disagree with. I want to tell people that it's just that personally I prefer to stick to Filipino because it has a to me some kind of historical significance. You see, way before Filipino was used to refer to the local populace of the Philippines, Filipino was first coined to refer to Spanish born people who were born here or spent their early lives here and grew up here. Because, as you know, Spain is about halfway around the globe from the Philippines. So, when we were conquered by Spain, going here for a lot of folks was a one-way trip. And to distinguish the peninsular Spanish from the insular Spanish, they've decided to adopt the name Filipino for themselves because they live in the Philippine Islands. So it wasn't until the late 19th century when I think I could be wrong on this because disclaimer, I'm not a history professor or anything like that. Um, Jose Rizal was the person who coined the term Filipino, who co-opted it from the colonial masters to refer to people living in the Philippines. Back then, even Rizal's contemporaries, such as Andres Bonifacio, who we just celebrated Bonifacio Day last November 30, he wanted freedom for everyone in the Philippines, but he referred to his movement as the the revolution of the Katagalugan or the Tagalogs. So there was still a very strong regional thinking in between the different islands and the different cultures within the Philippines. And it was Jose Rizal who decided to let's just use the term Filipino to refer to everyone here. So there's also the argument about Filipino being an ungendered term because Southeast Asian languages are generally ungendered with their pronouns. But at the same time, let we have to remind ourselves that the term Filipino started as a Spanish word, and Spain is hella gendered. Like not just their even their I don't know a lot of Spanish, but even their objects sometimes get gendered. So that's how strong their gendered pronoun game is. So I think to think of it as ungendered is looking at it through rose tinted lens. Like yes, if you identify as a woman and you have a Filipino passport, Your passport will tell you that you're Filipino because that's the catch-all term for the nationality. However, it's hard it's hard to unequivocally say that Filipino is ungendered when the word Filipina also exists, which is definitely gendered as female. So why do you have an ungendered Filipino and then a gendered Filipina? That means your default is male. So that's actually a bigger issue than you think. So I think the movement of Philippine X has something there. It's just that couching it in terms of Latinx for me is very Western in terms of its adaptation, and I'm not sure that's the way we should go with it. But the concern is there, and I hear you. I think when it comes to which ones are okay to use, just ask the person. If a person would like to be called Philippine X, then call them Philippine X because that's what they want to be called. If they want to be called Filipino, then call them Filipino or Filipina if they want that for themselves. I think that's the gist of it. Just call people what they want. It's the same with pronouns, right? If someone wants to be called by a very specific set of pronouns, then just go with it because that's their identity, that's their reality. So anyway, wow, that's already a big segue. Mm, there's actually a long history of Filipino stories from the epics, from the Karanduuns. A Karanduun is actually a hero of the Kandu, or an epic story, basically one of those long form stories that take days to chant. The heroes of those stories are called Kandu, and that's actually where shout out to Wax. That's where the RPG Karanduun came from in terms of the name. And then you have your epics during the colonial era, which includes Ibong Adarna, the Adarna bird. I think even though it's a colonial era story, it's actually still very close to pre-colonial in terms of the culture of it all. Like everyone calls themselves princess and stuff, but if you think about them as datus, it actually makes more sense. And then there's Florante and Laura, and of course Jose Rizal himself was an accomplished writer. He was an accomplished everything. Ah, polymaths, blah. And then towards the martial law era, when there was a strong suppression of literary works that are not approved by the government, there was a there was an underground movement of different stories. So there's a lot of stories out there, and to just consume American media or Western media, they are good stories. I will say that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should ignore Filipino stories and the stories of our friends as well, in the for the rest of Southeast Asia. Well, that's part of what we're trying to do with the RPGSEA hashtag, right? Oh, so what are we looking at here? I actually like to talk with some sounds on, but as you know, proprietary music is hard. Ambient Mixer though works on a Creative Commons license, just as last time. So I look for Southeast Asia sounds, and it gave me this ancient Khmer city. I am worried that this will be a bit mm, prejudiced. Asian sounds, yeah. Let's see. If we like it, we'll keep it. If not, let's see. Because I get nervous without the music, without the sounds. Setting up channels, show mixer. We have a jungle sounds already. Jungle sounds. Something called a shakuhachi. Uh, that doesn't sound. Anyway, there are your animal sounds, small stream, an Amish carriage. Hmm. I guess a carriage will always sound like a carriage. Let's see. Let's try playing it. Oh, okay. There's the chanting, which is okay. I think it's this one. Is it this one? Yes, it's this one. Let's try making it round. 8 times per 10 minutes. I said 8 times. Oh, 2 times per 10 minutes. And then you have chickens. Nah, sounds like home. Because I'm currently in a condominium units, but my home in Mandaluyong actually has a lot of chickens around it. Anyway, let's see if this is distracting. Let's lower it a bit so that it's just fading into the background. And let's go. So what's a Filipino story that I want to start with? One of my favorite ones that is available online is a story called The Sugilanon of Epiphania's Heartbreak. I think we can find it. Let's look for it. Sugilanon of Epiphania's Heartbreak. This is one of the stories that I really liked earlier on in my life, and then when Bianca and I started dating, it's one of those first things that we enjoyed together because apparently she also read and enjoyed the Sugilanon of Epiphania's Heartbreak. This is actually about Epiphania, which is it varies what she was. If she was a part goddess or if she was just powerful with the spirits or things like that. It's quite long. I would recommend this. It's the first Google result if you type in the Sugilanon of Epiphania's Heartbreak. So of course, based on the title, there's a heartbreak involved, and there's also mango involved, and a lot of juices, and somewhat. I wouldn't say it's an erotic story, but there's an erotic symbolism to the mango as a as the representative of your passionate heart. So go ahead and check it out. It will probably take you around 20 minutes to read. And it is by Ian Rosales Casapon. I've seen him around Twitter. I think he's on Twitter. I may even be misgendering the person. So just look for the person on Twitter and let's see their pronouns. It's actually a little hard for us to talk about pronouns, and we will make a lot of mistakes because we do have ungendered pronouns in our native language, which is what is running in my head. I talk in Tagalog, and I'm just translating it to English as I talk. So that's how it is. Also, I like it because it is a modern writer that is able to describe or emulate the feel of an old epic story where things are just there's just this godlike power levels. I have a bot. Let's kick the bot. Yeah. How do I kick the bot? Block. There you go. Why aren't you blocked yet? Come on, report. Anyway, don't click on the link, guys. I'll try to clean that up later. So, that's moving on. Wait, let me just take a drink first. A lot of the stories that you will see online, and this includes the RPGs that you will encounter online, it's going to be written from the middle class perspective because, unfortunately, those from below, those from the lower classes, don't quite have the access to the internet that we have, and or maybe their stories are not so. I don't want to say not well written. They're actually very good stories. It's just that in terms of trying to trying to market it to an international audience, it is very local in context. There, that's. Did I say that safely? And let's talk about some of the stories that we have encountered already. As you know, I am one of the writers for the Islands of Sinauna, which is a D&D 5th edition product that uses pre-colonial mythologies and translates them into the D&D game, right? But even that itself is written from an idea of let's look at everything pre-colonial and try to not put colonial ideas into it. That is the direction of the product, and that is certainly an okay direction to go to. There are very interesting stories to talk about. But so much of our identity as Filipinos is shaped by our colonial experience because not only were we conquered by Spain, when they left, they sold us to America, and the USA was here for about 4 decades. And then the Japanese happened during World War II. And then now it's still neo-imperialist, colonialist in terms of our identities, right? And basically, to discount that is to erase a big part of who we have collectively become. I think I'm not saying we should celebrate the colonialism. I'm saying that by ignoring them entirely, there are a lot of aspects of our stories that you will just not talk about, right? I was actually reading this book by Ileto recently. Here it is. The Passion and Revolution. This is popular movements in the Philippines from 1840 to 1910. It is actually a very interesting book because it looks at the uprisings of in the Philippines, starting from the earlier ones in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, and how they're invariably related to religious ideas of freedom. And again, I'm not a professor of these things. I just like to read them and try to digest them in my own headspace. But what I have seen about Passion and Revolution is that a lot of our ideas have always been spiritual. Even in pre-colonial times, we have always been spiritual. We have always talked about the Diwata and how the animist point of view shapes us and how we welcomed incoming religions and decided to integrate different aspects of those religions into our stories and into our identity. So even though we're a very Catholic country, if you go here, we still believe in the Nuno sa Punso, and you don't want to disturb the termite mound because there might be a dwarf there, right? That will curse you, and that is compatible with the Catholic identity of the Philippines. So it's monotheist but with lots of spirits. So it's an interesting point of view. But also, by the time of the revolution, there was a very strong Catholic imagery with our revolutions. And even the Katipunan, the the revolution that eventually gained us our freedom from the Spanish. This was presented in history books as a very matter of fact came out of the Masons, evolved into this movement that is based on enlightenment that eventually gained our independence. And it discounts a lot of evidence that actually shows how Bonifacio and the OG Katipunan actually integrated a lot of spiritual thought into their revolution. Like, to sign up to be a Katipunero, you had to go up the mountain, enter their secret lair, and then sign your name in blood to swear yourself to secrecy, right? That is not just symbolic. That is also grounded in a lot of belief. So, this bot is actually really bothering me. I wanna ban. There you go. I found it. So what was I saying? Oh yes, the reason why there are two versions of the Katipunan of the history books and the Katipunan that is very spiritual in nature, is because history is written by the middle class. So this is the middle class and the victors eventually, because there was a power struggle within the Katipunan also, and Bonifacio died in that power struggle. So it's interesting because from their point of view, it's a very RPG centric, it's a very RPG rich story when you talk about how Katipuneros believed in a mother that has died, but they have to bring her back to life so that she can free us from our oppressors. And they didn't even have a word for liberty. So they eventually settled on the word layaw. Layaw is a Tagalog word that means to do what you want. So whenever someone is laki sa layaw or brought up by layaw, that means he or she or they grew up spoiled. Grew up thinking that they can do whatever they want. That's the idea of layaw. And that eventually transcended to become the idea of laya without the W. And laya is liberty or freedom. Malaya. To say malaya is to say you are free. So that's interesting, right? Very good book. I really recommend getting it and reading it. It will also connect to the movements all the way to the 1960s and maybe even to some of the movements that exist today, and how they are rooted in religious significance but is also looking at progressive ways to move the country forward. So check it out. Reynaldo Ileto, Passion and Revolution. Yes. So why am I talking about that? That actually segues a little bit into one of my stuff. So haha, this is actually just one big self-promotion. Let's see. I was looking at the Sugilanon. I want to look at the Sons of Laya, which is something that I wrote a few years ago. Sons of Laya, who? Sons of Laya, Patreon. There you go. So I wrote the Sons of Laya based on what I've read about Passion and Revolution. And here I look at, let's start with Supremo. Part 1 is Supremo, which is loosely based on Andres Bonifacio. So, wow, this is my first ever Patreon content, way back when. So, here's the first content. So let's look at it. I think this is a free PDF download, which you can do with, you don't have to be a patron to download my stuff, because it's the patrons who pay for my work. So let's see, Sons of Laya, Supremo. So long before he was hailed as the Supremo, the peasant that would one day lead the Sons of Laya was a stage actor. That's another thing that a lot of people forget when they're talking about Andres Bonifacio, is that he was a stage actor, along with Macario Sakay. Of all the plays he performed, none spoke to him as fiercely as the tale of the Haring Tao, or the King of the Tao. This is actually related to how Andres Bonifacio's favorite story was the story of Bernardo Carpio, the lost prince of the Spanish. But translated to Tagalog, it became this idea of a Spanish king that has been buried in between the rocks of the mountains. And that Bernardo Carpio is stuck there, but when he is freed, he will lead the Tagalogs once again, and then he will bring back the glory that was lost. So the idea here is that the Supremo, with like-minded friends, went on a pilgrimage to the Cordilleras, to the mountains, to find their king. But they did not find the Haring Tao. When they returned from the mountains, they now called themselves the Sons of Layao. So the idea here is that they instead found the body of Layao, this goddess, which also corresponds to something that actually happened in the Katipunan. When the Americans arrived and the rest of the revolution basically surrendered to the Americans, Macario Sakay was still fighting the Americans until around 1908. So the Filipino-American War, I think, happened around 1898 all the way to 1901. I could be wrong. Again, I'm not a historian, it but Makaya Sakai carried on the cause of his friend Bonifacio all the way to 1908 before he was eventually caught and beheaded. Was he beheaded? No, I think he was hanged. Ugh. So the interesting thing about Sakai was that as the successor supremo to Bonifacio, Makayo Sakai carried around with him a large box that he basically referred to as the coffin of Inang Bayan or Mother Country. She is supposed to be interred there, reduced to bones, and we need to be worthy of her for her to come back to life. So basically carried this box everywhere. And eventually when he was defeated and they recovered this box and they opened it, it contained bullets and paperwork. So does that mean that he was bullshitting us? Or did a part of him believe it? It's one of those things that is very interesting and very nice to adapt to RPGs. So that's the Supremo for me. That's part one, and then part two is the Mother's Coffin, which I just talked about, and part three is Mabuhay. This is one of my first Diwata stat blocks. This is something that I really am. Well, it's probably aged by now, but I'm kind of proud of it because the mother is only a CR5 goddess. If you were here last time, you'd know that I really like statting Tagalog deities or Filipino deities in general. So let's look at her. So, the Tao barely remember their own gods. To them, Inanglaio's memory is as fleeting as a child's recollections of a lost parent. Instead, in the hallowed halls of a foreign god's church, they are told to utter rote, indecipherable prayers as the wooden statues of the sun god and the saints loom over their hunched figures. So there's a strong against the core Catholic belief here. But since they don't remember Inanglaio anymore, their conception of Inanglaio has changed to match those of their colonial masters. And that is why when Inanglaio stares from her coffin, there's a very Catholic look to her, the way I describe her. So Inanglaio stares in her coffin. She lies and dreams of the time when she was Daragang Layo, the spirit of the mountains overlooking the sea. So, check her out. She is, if I remember correctly, I gave her a challenge rating of 5. I gave her a challenge rating of 5. And then she has some very, somewhat broken abilities here. I think it's absolute loss of inhibition. Yeah, this is the one. So, basically, what this does is Inanglaio frees a target she touches from the walls society has built within the mind. Taboos no longer need to be avoided, and desire takes root. So it becomes actually layaw and not laya. This absolute freedom opens up too many wants and overwhelms the senses. Treat it as a short-term madness. A successful intelligence saving throw suppresses the madness, but not the loss of inhibition. So whether or not you succeed, you somehow feel yourself uninhibited by social mores, which remains while the target is in the presence of Inanglaio. I really like this ability because even though it's not combat oriented per se, there is a very good story that is going to be told from this. Okay? And this is generally why we started the RPGSEA hashtag with the rest of our friends from Southeast Asia. With our friends from Malaysia, from Indonesia, from Singapore. I think there are also Thailand people who are now using the hashtag on Facebook. Not on Twitter, I think. Although I could be wrong. The idea is that we have stories that are not, I don't want to say unique, but they come from our perspective, and it might be a story that you may not have heard of, or it's a story that is interesting because it feels new. Oh, you haven't met the Thailand folks yet? Yeah, actually, me neither. Although they have been posting from time to time. Very rarely, though. I think they have their own community, they have their own cons, but it's still very Thailand centric for now. They don't want to branch out yet, and that's up to them, really. That's part of the idea of the RPGSEA, of having different pockets, and then when they want to branch out, then we're there to welcome them, and otherwise each doing our own things, right? So that's what we want to. Oh, I'm still called Nosferatu here. Before I adopted the Buko Juice name, Buko Juice, I was known as Nosferatu the Vampire Kitten, but it didn't talk about the identity that I have attached to my games, which has a very Filipino branding to it. So going for buko juice, which is the Tagalog for coconut juice, and it so also happens to be called BJ, which is also my real name. Plus, also, being called BJ is fun. There's a lot of like this session is called the Late Night BJs. Don't click on that hashtag too much. You're gonna see things. Anyway, what is BJ short for? I Yes, it's short for something, but it's my real name, so I don't really give it away. But it's also easy to guess. Where were we? Yes. So, speaking of RPGSEA, I wanted to actually give a quick shout out to. Well, since you're here, Sam, I want to give a quick shout out to you, as well as to Sin and Pam. And. Oh, wait, is Pam here? I don't think. Yes, Pam is here. So, Pam, Sam, Wax, with the help of Sandy Pug Games. And I will not answer that, Sam. But like I said, it's easy to guess. Where were we? Oh, yes. They're collaborating to bring us something called Shores, which is an RPG SEA collective project. So I'm really interested in this. Check them out. I am excited to see RPG SEA move beyond just a Twitter hashtag and show up in a lot of other places like Kickstarter, and we're also having a Session Zero Con in January, which is an online convention, which is this experimental space wherein you have your own sprite and you walk around like a convention, and then you can talk to people. I'm really excited about everything that's happening in the RPG SEA world. And really, if you want to talk about our stories, what better way to start than with role-playing games, right? There is actually one of the terms that have been reserved for Dungeon Masters GMs that I think World of Darkness uses is storyteller. And I actually like that. It's something that I quite self-identify with, although it's not always popular, because the idea of the naysayers of the storyteller as a term for a GM is that you're not a storyteller because you're not telling the story. You're just setting the stage for the players, for everybody to then tell the story. To which I say, yes, that is true. But also, storytellers have only been static, one-directional storytellers in recent memory with the advent of one-way communication devices like film and radio. When you were as early as our grandparents' generation, when your lolos and lolas, when your grandparents tell stories to their young grandchildren and great grandchildren, it's never one directional. It's never, it's my story and I'm gonna tell my story alone, and if you try to interfere I will be mad. Maybe some of the grandparents are like that, but in my experience, a storyteller actually responds to their audience, also to the other people I want to say campfire, but that's very medieval, right? To the other people in the gathering. When a child interjects something and adds something to the storyteller weaves it in. You don't reject that. You weave that in and you add those stories. You add those elements of the story into what you're trying to tell. And sometimes if especially if you're being very collaborative about it, you can tell your own stories. Sorry, you can tell a collective story with everyone in the gathering. So for me, I feel like that's still the role of the GM to be not the only storyteller, but to be a storyteller. We do tell stories. We are just not static about them. We're not one directional. So I don't know. I just like the term storyteller. Yeah, people may disagree, but GM is also kind of like 50-50 on that because master. Huh. I think I went too far there. Haha. Anyway, how long have we been doing this? It's actually a little bit short this time. I think that's all I wanted to say today, actually. Yeah, it's all about storytelling and how it applies to the RPGSEA perspective. And I hope you check us out. And next week, I think I will go. I will do another late night BJ, and I will. I don't know what. I don't know what I will talk about next yet. But I really like doing this because it gets me used to the camera, which when I was younger, I didn't feel as much shame as I do now. Now, whenever I look at the camera, I'm like, it's me. It's old me. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoyed it. And for those who are watching this outside of the live stream, I also hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you next time. Um, Thank you and goodbye.